What Douglas has said is now going to be examined by our next panelist on the Hangout. He is a youth activist and writer from Yemen who has written for the New York Times and appeared on Al Jazeera and CNN, amongst other things. More importantly, he is the only one of our speakers tonight to have had direct personal experience of living with drones and to have witnessed the aftermath of a drone strike. Ladies and gentlemen, Ibrahim Mothana. Ibrahim, over to you.
Thanks. Perhaps I would like to start with what Henry Louis Mencken once said, and he said, for every complex problem, there's a solution that is easy, clear, and wrong. And I think this is exactly what was elaborated in what Douglas was speaking about. It's easy to bring about examples from here and there, but when it comes on the ground in Yemen, drones has been terribly disastrous. I can speak about tens and tens of examples, but perhaps it's important to see them in a context, to see them to understand the domino effect that they are creating. One of the examples is the drone strike against the deputy governor of Marib. He was someone who's an ally in the war on terror. He's someone who was cooperating both with the government, who had meetings with the Americans, and he was someone who spent years and years trying to fight Al-Qaeda and extremist groups back in Yemen. He was killed mistakenly in a drone strike. That's part of the story. The second part of the story is that his tribe ended up closing the pipeline, the main pipeline in Marib, in his governorate, for a year, and that cost the Yemeni economy over $4 billion. And when we speak about $4 billion in a tiny and poor country like Yemen, this is like closing Wall Street for a year. And what that leads to is actually creating the exact environment where extremist groups, where groups like Al-Qaeda and Ansar al-Sharia can flourish. And this is exactly why we had an increasing numbers of militants from 2009 until now. Brennan in 2009 was speaking about 300 Al-Qaeda members, and in his last US policy talk, he was speaking about 1,000. So it's important to ask why this is happening and why we are creating the exact environment for such groups to flourish and live. I agree with you, Douglas. Terrorism is a problem. Al-Qaeda, for me, for someone who lived in Yemen for his entire life, is an existential threat. But dealing with it with the wrong tools and not solving it with the right means is really disastrous. What can we do? Let us see how, what were the major achievements in the war on terror in Yemen and how it was achieved. It wasn't achieved by drone strikes. It was achieved with cooperating with the local communities. It was achieved by cooperating with the Yemeni army, and this is actually how Al-Qaeda and Ansar al-Sharia was kicked away from Abyan and last week from Al-Bayda. It's not drone strike. There's no easy solution. There's no shortcuts. The second thing, we cannot just deal with the symptoms of such a problem without dealing with the underlying problems. We need to tackle the underlying economic, social problems, and this actually will take years and years of efforts. And if all the money that was spent on strikes, if the cruise missile that cost over $500,000 and ended up killing 44 civilians in Al-Majala and Abyan was spent on their livelihood, was spent on making their life better, we would have not ended up having many and many people who joined terrorist groups from that areas. Finally, it's really important to know that it's not only white and black. There are a lot of people who are in the gray zone. There are a lot of people who are, especially within Yemen tribes, who are like stem cells, who, if we cooperated with them, if we ended up working with them, will be part of the effort against terrorists. And it's on the contrary, they could fight the government and end up creating troubles if the family members are killed, if the areas are attacked, and if all the economy...
Ibrahim, I'm going to ask Douglas to very quickly, because we're running out of time in your slot, just very quickly to respond. And then I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap it up. Douglas?
I wanted very quickly, thank you, Ibrahim, to ask two genuine questions. First of all, how long do you think it's going to take to sort out Yemen's economic problems? And secondly, what would you suggest the United States should have done, since the Yemeni army could do nothing about Awlaki, since American troops were not going to put their feet on the ground in Yemen? What would you say they should have done instead of using a drone strike?
Well, actually, it's really important to see what drone strikes has actually created in Yemen. We're speaking when the drone program started in Yemen, it was actually targeting high value targets. But what we ended up having is hundreds and hundreds of people who were killed.
So is that? Are you saying nothing is better than? It would have been better to do nothing. Is that your answer to Douglas on that?
What should be done is actually cooperating with the tribes and local communities, exactly as we had from 2000 and 2005, and it was quite effective. By the end of 2006, we almost had no Al-Qaeda activities in Yemen at that point, and not relying only on drones, because what we ended up seeing in Yemen is that the consequences of it is much worse than what it really achieved.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim. I think we're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid, because we've got to go on. You will have a chance later on to ask further questions. Douglas, Ibrahim, thank you very much for that.
Absolutely. I'd like to see the drones program brought into the sunlight in some respect. And there's limits to that. But bring it into the sunlight. Let the Congress have the normal level of oversight that it does over military operations. Give the courts some scrutiny and provide a check on the executive branch. That would go some way towards making sure that drones target people who maybe should be targeted, as opposed to making accidental strikes on innocent civilians.
Douglas, would you go along with that?
I just wanted to pick up on this because I think, certainly on this side, we agree that there is not enough known about this. We would like more known. I wish that more newspapers, I wish more investigative journalists had spent recent years looking into this. It is very striking that something, sorry to harp on about this, but something which, if George Bush had been doing, would have been all over your front pages from day one, has taken all of these years for people, in particular at the moment the left in America and Britain, to even wake up to. Because there has been a sense, well, this is our guy, Barack Obama is our guy, we want him to get re-elected, so let's at least hold it until the 2012 election, well, let's wait till he's back in the White House at least, let's not spoil the party. I think this is an indictment of the profession which I'm a part of, but there is a legitimate reason to be concerned about the studies that are being cited at the moment. And I just wanted to focus on the one. One of the organizations which has done a lot of work on this and is repeatedly cited is the Bureau of Investigative Journalism. This is also the Bureau of Investigative Journalism that fingered as a rapacious, rampant paedophile an entirely innocent Tory peer, Lord McAlpine. Now look, if we're going to give the amount of oversight and analysis that was rightly done on the Bureau of Investigative Journalism's analysis of Lord McAlpine, then I think that we should do the same with drones. But people do not do it. And there's a reason. Because there is a lobby of people who want to believe the worst. They want the worst figures when it's to do with America. They want America to have killed the largest number of people. Some of us hope
well, just
that
going back
America
on the
kills
question
as
of
few people
figures,
as possible, as
Clive, I
little
think you're
I don't like things like, the Bureau of Investigative Journalism's reports on drone strikes, which has been really careful with. I've looked at their methodology academically. It's very strong, and the fact that one of them made a mistake about a paedophile and resigned is irrelevant to what they do about drone strikes, and that's just nonsense and a silly thing to say. But
it gets to the heart of it. It gets to the heart of it. They don't.
It doesn't get to the heart of anything. It doesn't get to the heart of anything. If I found out that somebody from your organisation was a paedophile, would that invalidate everything you had to say ever?
No, I imagine if somebody from your university wrote a paper pretending that somebody who wasn't a paedophile was a paedophile, then it would cast some doubt on your university.
On the whole university. You think that every department might be
which maybe another this is drones.
Yes, okay.
Can I ask a very simple question?
But I think the methodology was good.
I'll take your
The greater danger is in the short term that they encourage a significant level of opposition to the local government. I mean, one of the things that Christine pointed out is that we're taking on local Pakistani groups, for example. Does this then turn the Pakistani population against the United States? A June 2012 Pew survey suggested 74% of Pakistanis consider the United States an enemy.
Nothing to
And
do
if
with
that's
it.
true, then it gets
Oh,
harder and
Douglas.
harder for that government to say yes to the United States.
Do you want to respond to that local government point, Douglas?
I wanted to respond to Clive's point, if that's okay. Sorry. Perfectly interesting point that was. Look, if terrorism is caused by reaction to terrorism, which is what Clive is saying, then what do you do when you are struck by terrorists? I repeat the point I tried to make earlier. Maybe it didn't make it very well. If you cannot send people in, it would be nice to be able to send in whole phalanxes of lawyers to go and arrest people, read them their Miranda rights in Yemen and so on, and take them back to a fair trial in the US or so on. But if you cannot do that, what do you do? If you try to state build in some of these countries, you don't get very much love. If you try to do targeted strikes against individuals, you don't get very much love. Reacting to terrorism and trying to stop terrorism in all sorts of contexts will not get you very much love from other people, but it will do the job, if you do it well, that the President of the United States has to do, which is to keep the American people safe. 2 American presidents now have managed that. President Bush and President Obama have managed to stop any repeat of 9/11 on American shores. That is their job. That is their #1 job. It would be wonderful if it was also possible to stop any attacks on the United States and simultaneously be loved by everybody. But nobody has yet come up with a way in which to do that.
Okay, thank you for that.
Many other. This is this blinkered approach. It's the same with destabilizing world security, as if we're the only people who will ever have this technology. We're the only people who ever use it. There are a lot of countries coming online who will use it. Now, do you think we're going to set ourselves at a military disadvantage? If you look at why you want autonomous drones, it's simply because you break communication links if you're fighting with a more sophisticated force. We're not fighting with the Taliban. Sorry, it's a very long argument.
No, it's a long answer, but it's a deserved one. Douglas, you have got something to say. I see your hand, Mohammed, over there in Florida.
Every single development in the history of war has always had this discussion around it.
That's all right,
when
then.
Gunpowder was first invented, Ariosto said in the early 16th century, he was talking about how this would make war impossible, it would make it immoral, it would stop chivalry, the individual wouldn't be able to see the person they were killing, and so on. This conversation has always gone on. And the conversation always goes on to what happens when other people get it. Of course we should be having that discussion. But let me simply answer your question. You said earlier, what would we do when the Chinese use a drone to kill the Dalai Lama? They could kill the Dalai Lama now. Mm-hmm. They don't, because they know there would be an international blowback. They could send somebody to go and kill the Dalai Lama with a knife tomorrow. And we would react in the same way we would react if China sent a drone to kill him tomorrow. That's how we'd react.
Just 1 minute, because Mohammed is... Isn't the argument that drones encourage terrorism a moot point in a world where just drawing a cartoon encourages terrorism, or writing books or making a film can incite the same reaction?
It's certainly not a moot point, is it? I mean, we want to do everything we can to prevent the encouragement.
But I think the questioner is saying to make the point that this inflames terrorism is a weak point to make because it is so easily inflamed.
Well, I don't think so. I think we've done so many things to inflame it. And in response to what Douglas was saying a moment ago, the more that we, who hold ourselves out as the leaders in democracy and all that stuff, the more that we sacrifice our own principles, we give the others the excuse to do it. So when we had Guantanamo Bay, Indonesia set up a little Guantanamo Bay off the coast of Indonesia, and so on and so forth. We have to stand up for decency, or we may as well give up.
Nobody disagrees with that. It's simply that some people note that among the voices of opposition to every single thing that America decides under consecutive presidents to do to defend herself, certain people tend to speak not as critics, but as enemies.
I don't understand that.
It is something which Americans and others are quite rightly aware of. That if you are arguing a point where you think that you can improve the American system, or you think that America could tackle terrorism better, then you have yet to come up with it.
No, we got lots
Currently,
of it. Let me tell you.
all you can do
is
to
we won't get you to tell us, Clive, right now. We're going to get Michael
impossible answers.
to tell us about better ways